So hello and welcome to today's chat with TechRound. We're excited to be talking to Jack Thorogood, who's the founder and CEO of Native Teams. Native Teams is a global platform for work payments and employment designed to help both businesses and remote workers with payroll, employment, and compliance solutions. Jack, thank you for joining us today.
Cool. No, thanks, Gina, and hello and hi, everybody.
Awesome. So we're going to dive right in. Jack, can you tell me a little bit about Native Teams, please?
Yeah, sure. So Native Teams is a company I founded with my co-founder and business partner, Alex, just over 5 years ago, actually now. And really the goal for Native Teams was to remove friction from work payments. Initially, we were looking to address the friction that can arise between international remote workers and our international clients. And that was the problem that we initially set out to solve. But really over the last 4 or so years, as we've kind of been on the journey, it took us a year to launch the first version of the platform after we founded the business. But we've really kind of focused on how can we remove friction from all different sorts of work payments. So a lot of it is still around the international remote work environment, and there is quite a bit of friction there. And we've always been very passionate to make it easier for opportunity and talent to connect without the friction around the payment side of things. But actually, more recently, we started to address the gig economy space as well. There's friction in gig economy payments is a bit different than in international remote working payments, but nonetheless, they're kind of a friction and a problem there for us to solve.
And why would you say the gig economy issue and friction was something that stood out to you as a problem to solve?
I mean, really, so a couple of reasons. I mean, first off, we've always looked to do what we're doing because of, I guess, kind of pain and issues we've seen ourselves. So when we founded the business, prior to Native Teams, I was running a small business creating software for other people. We were building marketing software, webinar software, and what have you. And even back then with the small team, we had issues where people were getting paid and getting good money in their pocket for great work that they were doing, but it wasn't always going through the right channels. They weren't always kind of getting paid through the payroll system and what have you. And so we had an issue there and we needed to fix ourselves. We had a really good designer, for example. He had to leave us because he couldn't get a mortgage because he didn't get paid through the payroll system. So that was an issue that we fixed ourselves. So kind of a classic kind of, we felt the pain, we needed to create something to fix it. And when it comes to gig economy as well, we started to see an increasing amount of people from the gig economy sector using Native Teams anyway to kind of try and simplify how their work payments were working. And to be frank, they slightly use Native Teams despite our platform. Our platform is not optimized for gig economy at that particular point in time. So we thought, well, look, what's important to gig economy? What are the kind of the main issues when it comes to remuneration in the gig economy that we can really help fix? And so during the course of last year, we iterated our platform quite a bit to kind of tackle the slightly different challenges that come from remuneration in the gig economy space. But again, it's kind of based on people who are already using our platform, listening to them, understanding what matters to them, and then, really amending the platform a little bit, or adding to the platform, I should say, to better accommodate for that.
Okay, great. And so how would you say that Native Teams has evolved since it was first launched?
Well, it's an interesting one. And I can say this without ego and arrogance, that we're just far, far more mature than we were, obviously by definition, but we were when we evolved. But to be frank, we're far more mature than we were 6 months ago. But the reason I can say that without arrogance is I know that in 6 months' time, I'll look back and think, goodness me, we're so much better now than we were 6 months ago. And that's always been the journey that we've been on. I mean, just from a kind of logistics perspective, we've really grown a lot as a team. When we founded the business, there was about 15 of us or so. We kind of started it from within the agency business that we were running at the time. And I remember the end of the first year, which was 2020, about 15 people. End of 2021, to be frank, we were sort of still in our very early stage. I think we got to about 20 people. But then really growth has kind of hugely accelerated. I think the end of 23 we were like 90 people. End of 23, 150 people. End of last year, 300 people. It's really kind of grown hugely from that perspective. And to be frank, that's obviously changed how we have to do some things. We've matured a lot as an organization. We've got a lot more kind of structure in place. I think the one thing we've kind of really tried to sustain, however, was that kind of founding culture. And I'm a big believer that, in a founder-led business, and Native Teams is led by me and my co-founder, Alex, the business kind of, if you let it, and if you're intentional about it, which we really have and which we really are, the business does kind of pick up a little bit of the DNA of you as the founders. And I think that's kind of how we continue to run a business. We're very much a kind of a people-first company, if you will. We're formal. We are just kind of really looking to build an environment where people, to be frank, are friends with each other, enjoy the time they spend working with one another. And that's something that, even though we're way bigger now than we were before, and we're still quite small, but in the grand scheme of things, but we've managed to kind of sustain that culture within the business. So that is something that hasn't changed, although a heck of a lot has changed around it.
Right. So I assume that's something that you would want to keep going and focus on as the company continues to grow.
Yeah, we work really hard. I say we work hard at it. We put the opportunity for the right culture we want to have to happen to kind of take place. So to be frank, first off, I think the culture we've got starts with the people we hire. I'm really lucky that our head of HR, or the lady who sets the kind of the standard when it comes to recruitment, she's worked with me for about 8 years, something along the way, actually just over 8 years now, 8.5 years. So she knows me really well. She knows Alex really well. She knows what we look for in people. And to be frank, I'm sure there's many exceptionally talented candidates that never kind of come across my desk or get taken on just because Daniela doesn't feel that kind of quite the right culture fit for the business. So it starts with the kind of hiring process. But then once we've got the right people, we do everything we can do to help build friendships, build bonds with people. I know some businesses can be a little bit anti, people fraternizing with one another too much at work or after work, but we're really for it, because one thing we've seen since the very start of the business is that the more people really like their colleagues, enjoy working with their colleagues, to be frank, the more they don't want to let their colleagues down. So that's been really critical for us. To be frank, it also makes work a whole load more fun as well, whether that's kind of evenings out in the kind of kafanas, as they call them in the Balkans, where a lot of our colleagues are based, or as I was starting to mention before we kicked off the recording side of things, once a year we hire a bunch of villas in Greece for a whole month, and really try and have everybody in the company go and stay there for two or three nights. I think it's the CX team that are there at the moment. The design team are just about to finish. And that really helps build bonds. It helps people have fun and do enjoyable things and get to know one another more of a personal level, as well as just kind of how they are at that job. And that's really helped with the culture. And for sure, we want to make sure we can sustain that.
Yeah, absolutely. And how would you say the overall mission of the company has changed or expanded since it was first founded?
Yeah, it's stayed the same, but we've got a bit clearer at how we think about it. So we've always set out to build a platform which is the best way for anybody to get paid, not just international remote workers, but anybody of gig economy workers nowadays. Next year, it'll be self-employed people that we'll start to turn a bit more attention to. So we've always had that mission. I think what has evolved a little bit is we took on some new investors last year, super smart fund based in London. And the partner that we work with there made a very clear point to say, right, Jack, so you just need to kind of nail down a little bit more, in one sentence, what is it you're building? The answer to that is the global work payments platform. And he also made it clear that, look, don't think to yourselves that you're kind of there already or that you have to be there already. Just think like that's the destination. And, to be frank, we're going to be there in like 3 to 5 years' time when we've fully built out this kind of global work payments platform. But what that has allowed us to do is to kind of think, right, that's where we're trying to get to. These are the bits we've done so far. These are the bits we've still got to do. And it just kind of allows us to be a little bit more intentional about the steps we need to take to kind of achieve that overall ambition. So I think, mission has stayed broadly the same. We just got a bit better at talking about it and understanding it ourselves and understanding kind of whereabouts we are on that particular journey.
All right, cool. So also just like a whole lot of clarity, and I suppose your progress and growth and getting more investors involved just kind of helps to guide you in that direction a little bit.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, I know it's a kind of a real truism within any business, and people always say it's invaluable to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, and for sure the investors we have are way smarter than I am. And that's not to say they run the business or they want to run the business, but just to have really intelligent people to kind of to talk things through with, and to kind of who are really thinking about our business and can then share the fruits of those thoughts with us. That's been really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose coming from a different perspective as well is always going to be incredibly valuable.
So just on that different perspective note, I will say that's something which has been really intrinsic to our business and from the start. So, I was very deliberate when I founded the business to found it with a co-founder, Alex, who I mentioned just earlier. So Alex and I worked together for several years before Native Teams, but it was more of a kind of employer-employee relationship. And I felt that actually, look, this is going to be a far, far better business if I found it with somebody who actually does have a different perspective from me. I'm, I guess, a middle-class, middle-aged white guy from the UK, and Alex is a female from a different part of Europe, bit younger than me, has a different kind of backstory and background. And to be frank, having somebody who, to be honest with you, can't be fired, whatever they say, that kind of an intrinsic part of the founding story, the founding journey, and so therefore can argue or disagree as robustly as they want to without any kind of fear of any consequence. That's really helped us make far, far better decisions. And I will add, we're not particularly argumentative, but just to have somebody who has the same status in the business to kind of really talk through the decisions we're making, why we're doing it, that's really been highly valuable as well. So yeah, it's that kind of hearing different perspectives has been something which has been really important for us from the start of the business.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose that kind of like constant push and pull is really valuable in the long term.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely. And that's been the case every year of our existence, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So last week, Native Teams launched GigPay. Can you tell me about GigPay and what it is and all about the platform, please?
Yeah, no, thank you. So GigPay is really the end result of the journey that I kind of mentioned started a year or so ago when we were seeing our customers from who kind of had self-onboarded were actually coming not just from international remote work environments, but coming from the gig economy as well. And they were using Native Teams despite the fact that we really weren't optimized for what they needed. And so we started to interview them, speak with them, started to try and build a bit of an understanding of what they were doing, how they were using the platform, what they really needed from the platform, areas, to be frank, where the platform was a little bit deficient for them in its current guise. And that's what really set us on this journey of building GigPay. So GigPay is a way to simplify the payments on behalf of the platforms and the aggregator, people who are often supplying larger numbers of people into the big online mobility and work platforms. It gives them a much simpler way to pay people. Now, paying gig workers is difficult. It's difficult in a different way that international remote working is difficult. International remote working payments are difficult because there's different currencies, there's different rules and compliance regulations and all the rest of it. Now, in some gig employment, there is still that kind of international component, but the complexity really comes from the variability of compensation. So people are earning wildly different amounts from one month to the next month. To be frank, it's quite volatile. A lot of gig work is not a job for life, as it were. People do it, then they stop doing it, then they might come back and do it again. And this is a real challenge for lots of the platforms and the aggregators who are working with these platforms to really manage. So essentially our proposition to our gig economy customers on the employer side of things is, look, tell us who and tell us how much these people have earned, and we will deal with everything else downstream from that. If they have to have an employment contract, because in some jurisdictions that's a requirement, fine, we can give them an employment contract. If they have to have a different type of contract, we can give them that as well. If they want to be paid partially through the payroll system, partially as a private entrepreneur or what have you, we can manage that side of things as well. So really GigPay is all about bringing simplicity to that quite complicated area of remuneration.
Okay. So I guess removing a lot of the bureaucratic headache, and there's just so many little complex details that you've got to deal with.
You're almost right. It removes it, but it doesn't remove it entirely. It removes it from our clients. It kind of puts it on us. But we built the system to kind of really deal with that in all the jurisdictions where we provide the service. Okay,
great. Yeah. So you kind of pointed out a little bit there and started touching on regulatory challenges. Can you tell me a little bit more about, maybe not specifics, but the regulatory challenges and tight compliance deadlines that GigPay helps people to deal with, or kind of, as you said, shifts the responsibility from them to you?
Yeah, sure. So the regulatory environment is really interesting. I mean, so from our international remote working side of things, we are present in 84 countries. With the GigPay products at the moment, we're just in a dozen, although we're adding more countries as we go along and new ones each month. But every country has slightly different legislation. That legislation tends to change as well. It's most complex when it pertains to tax. So one of the issues with the gig economy space has tended to be some people falling into a little bit of a grey area when it comes to how they're paying their taxes. Are they paying the taxes they should be paying? And that's an area where, particularly with certain sectors like the mobility sector, so Uber and Bolt and the food delivery companies, those are big platforms that often end up being in the sights of the regulators in the different countries of how they operate. And so they need to be squeaky clean. They need to make sure that they do everything absolutely by the book. The issue is that they're often working with a huge number, first of a huge number of riders or drivers. And secondly, those people often tend to be managed by in-country vendors, these so-called aggregators or 3PLs. And they don't necessarily have the resources or the tech smarts to kind of really have a tech-enabled platform. So what we can do is is give the certainty to these aggregators that, look, you pay somebody through native teams, and we're absolutely current with the local legislation. We'll make sure people are either paying their taxes when they should be paying their taxes, or if we don't have the full control over doing that on their behalf, we're telling them what they should be paying when they should be paying it. And it's a real moving target, particularly within the EU. There's directives that come in 2026, which people are starting to kind of think about with some degree of earnestness now, because, really it's sort of 6 months' time or whatever, and they need to be making sure they're complying with these things. But as I say, the landscape continues to evolve, but the penalties of getting it wrong are really quite severe, both in terms of reputational damage and fines and all the rest of it. So I say that's kind of really the area where there's the biggest kind of compliance challenges. The second part of your question was around timeliness. Now, the timeliness side of things, to be honest, when it comes to compliance, is not quite so pivotal. Yes, we need to do things in time, but that's normally on monthly or quarterly type resolutions. The timeliness when it comes to gig pay that's actually most pressing is the importance of these gig workers getting access to their earnings as quick as they can, because sometimes these are people that are not hugely wealthy. They're not always necessarily earning huge amounts of money. In many cases, indeed, they're doing this gig work to fill a bit of a hole, to have an additional income, to give them a little bit more money to kind of get through each month. And they can't be waiting around for that money. So one of the things that the gig pay platform also does is gives instant visibility to our users how much they have earned, how much of that has to be reserved for future tax payments and social contributions and what have you. But we give them a MasterCard. They can access the balance of that money immediately. So if you're somebody who's driven a taxi on a Monday, but you need to put diesel in or petrol in the car on the Tuesday so you can drive on a Wednesday, with GigPay you can really do that because you have that kind of card in your hand, so you can spend that money, at least the amount that's not been reserved for the tax and future payments like that. So it kind of really brings a lot of financial empowerment to users who otherwise, to be frank, don't always have that much control over when they're earning or receiving at least the money that they've earned.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess a major problem there, as you say, is that often, if people are in these positions and are getting paid through different international payment platforms, money tends to sit, and it's there, it's online, but it's having to withdraw, and then it's going through different channels, and then it's got to go into a local bank account, and it kind of just takes forever. So I can see how that really does solve quite a big problem for people that need access quite quickly.
It's an interesting area, and I think it's an area where sometimes public opinion and the perception in the media hasn't necessarily caught up with the realities today. So if you think about kind of more informal work environments, which I guess kind of the gig economy is, and how that was many years ago, before the transparency that comes with these kind of larger platforms now, which people tend to be working upon, there was the opportunity for the workers, if you will, to be not necessarily abused, but certainly taken advantage of. But the transparency that these big platforms have nowadays really puts the end worker absolutely in control of how they're working. But of course, they do need access to that, to what they've earned as soon as they can do. I think the problem is that oftentimes in the media, the story that's written about some of these kind of platforms is, there's these people that they're not earning a huge amount of money, and they're not on sort of full-time employment contracts, and they're not going to get holiday pay and this, that, and the other. But the problem is people want the flexibility to kind of dip in and out as they do. And in the old days, for sure, the balance of power is very different. The balance of power is often much more with the employer. But with these platforms in the gig economy, to be frank, the balance of power is much more with the gig worker. You travel in your typical taxi, and they will have a couple of different platforms available to them. They can accept rides, they can't accept rides, or choose not to accept rides. They can stop work whenever they want to stop work. But that kind of transparency really empowers them to make those best decisions. And the fact that they can stop work and they can access the money that they've earned up until that point, the gig pay is really important. So there's not kind of, I don't want to stop working because then I might not get my final paycheck. That really doesn't happen when they're being paid through native teams.
Right. Okay. So I guess it's a kind of restoring a little bit of autonomy in some sense. And the other thing that comes to mind is, obviously since COVID, things changed a lot. It almost feels like there's just been a massive acceleration, obviously, of the remote workforce, digital nomads. And, in a sense, a lot of the time, this kind of thing would be really useful for people that maybe aren't earning a lot of money, but there's also a lot of potential for people that are using these channels to actually make big money in ways that we may not have expected, 5 years ago, pre-COVID.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the danger is that as regulation, I wouldn't say regulation needs to catch up with these platforms. There's a danger that regulation kind of gets ahead of itself and ends up kind of regulating people out of that flexibility that they really want to have from these platforms. And as you say, there is first off, there are some really good opportunities for earning excellent money on some of these platforms, whether that's even on some of these kind of mobility platforms, the driving type platforms, which are often giving opportunities for slightly lower skilled people or people without specific skills that they can monetize to earn good money. And for sure, we see it firsthand, the amount of money that, the people that work hard and pick up lots of rides, they can earn a really decent income still, even in this day where these platforms are much more popular. But some of the more specialist platforms, development platforms, whatever it might be, influencer platforms, what have you, people can earn a huge amount of money by delivering the right skills to the people that really, really want it, but also delivering it in a way that's kind of flexible for them. You mentioned the digital nomads earlier. We see quite a lot of people, not so much obviously in the mobility side of things, but the influencers and what have you, that want to have a digital nomad or remote or work from home even lifestyle. But, they need the jobs and they need the roles and they need even sometimes a supplementary income to really to accompany that. And that's what gig work for sure enables.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so moving to the actual app, can you tell me a little bit about the mobile first app and how it works, and maybe just some of the main sort of services that it offers users?
Yeah, sure. So we have two kind of main user groups on this one. We have obviously the employer side of things, and then we have the employees as well. So the employee side, I'll start with that because that's the most simple. So effectively, our goal now is to enable people to start to see their earnings and access their earnings pretty much on the day one that they are using Native Teams Gig Pay. So one of the things we've done there, yes, it's of course mobile first, and employee/worker users can get access to the mobile app. They can go through a very simple KYC process there and then again on the mobile app. And one of the not rocket science, but actually really important changes we made to the platform between our gig pay products compared to our original international remote worker pay product is that, often they want a physical card so they can kind of not just use Apple Pay, but kind of withdraw cash or whatever it might be if they need to pay certain tolls and stuff in cash. But we made the decision, we have a stock of physical cards in country. So the very moment somebody goes through the KYC process, a card can be put in the post in the country where they live, and they normally get that the next day. So the mobile app is very simple. It's a wallet-based product, all around speed. They can access documents if they need to, employment contracts and the like. And also they can see their earnings broken out by where they earned it as well. So if they're driving for, let's say, Uber and Bolt, they can see their Bolt earnings and their Uber earnings. And they can also see the amount that's kind of been reserved for future tax payments at the end of the month or whatever. And that will vary again based on our smarts behind the scenes in terms of, not everybody has to pay the same amount of tax. Retired people that are doing this just to kind of supplement their pension, they pay different tax rates than people who are perhaps in alternative employment as well. So there's a huge amount of smarts behind the scenes, but for the end worker user, we really try and keep it very simple. For the B2B, as we call it, the employer side of things, really with that, it's all about how do we kind of make the approach as simple as possible. So essentially sort of following a fairly simple one-time setup process where they upload their entity information, their employment contracts, if they still want to continue to be the employer record. Once you've got all those ingested into the system, really just on a billing cycle basis, they can either enter it manually in the platform or they can upload a CSV of these are the names of the people, this is how much they've earned in this billing cycle. And we're connected to the Uber API. We see how much of these people have earned, and again can make those calculations so that really the workload, the administrative overhead for the aggregators in this situation is pretty much cut by 95% or something like that.
Okay, so I guess all around just a whole lot of convenience and security, and in terms of
simplicity is really what we're kind of aiming for. Absolutely.
Simplicity. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I guess you've noted this a few times. There's the businesses on the one side and then there's the workers on the other. So if we split that into kind of two questions, in what way is gig pay beneficial for businesses needing to pay gig workers?
We make sure that they're always the right side of any line, even if that line is sometimes a little bit hard to define. We've got the experts. We've built an automated product to really kind of make sure that whatever they throw at us, we keep them the right side of compliance, if you will. I think if the second half of the question was around the employee, from the employee side of things, again, it's really transparency and visibility. So they know what they've earned in real time or very close to real time. It depends a little bit on the platform. Some of them, there can be a sort of few hour lag between the earning taking place and actually being represented in the app, but it's really very, very little time lapses between the earning and it appearing in gig pay. And really from that point onwards, it's then access to those earnings as well, the ability to either withdraw that cash, again, aside from the amount that needs to be reserved for tax payments, or spend it directly on the Native Teams MasterCard. So it's that transparency, flexibility, and earlier access to earnings are really kind of the fundamental points for the worker side of things.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I believe that you guys ran a pilot case study with Hyperfy. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, Hyperfy is actually one of our earlier pilots that we ran last year and obviously continues to be a client of ours today. So Hyperfy is an interesting one. They connect influencers with marketing agencies. And to be honest with you, there's a couple of areas of our business that have been very beneficial for them and for those influencers. So from Hyperfy's perspective, not wishing to put words in their mouth, but this is what we've kind of heard firsthand from them. So first off, they're looking to find a way to make it easier to pay those influencers. And the variability of earnings from those influencers is huge. Some months they'll have a bonanza campaign and earn a fortune. Other months, they won't work at all or won't have a campaign with Hyperfy at all. So we really kind of give them the ability to pay people irrespective of how much they've earned, again, in a kind of compliant manner and in many cases internationally as well. Secondly, some of those want to have an employment contract. So part of what is unique to Native Teams is we can extend an employment contract to people, to frank, irrespective of how they're working, who they're working for, provided they obviously go through our KYC system and we're happy with that side of things, we can extend to them a local employment contract that gives them all the benefits of local employment, but all the flexibility of freelancing and working how they want to work. And I think for Hyperfy and for Hyperfy's influencers, this is particularly important because if you think about influencers, a much newer role and job title, if you will, it's something which you've got a first generation of people that are really succeeding, yet sometimes still struggling to kind of make a professional career as an influencer. And the more we can help that career feel sustainable, formalized, and actually, to be frank, in the eyes of banks and creditworthiness and all the rest of it, if we can give them employment contracts so they can do that influencing and actually feel, hey, look, I'm making this. This is a proper job in inverted commas. I can get a mortgage, I can get a car loan, I can qualify for state benefits, even though my job title is an influencer, which, to be frank, without Native Teams and without the ability to get that local employment contract, could be a real struggle. Now, sometimes there's some more costs that come with having local employer status. You have to make more social contributions, for example, in many cases than you do if you're a private entrepreneur. But depending on people's life circumstances, that can be the right decision to make because you might want to think, I want to have everything paid up through the payroll system so I can qualify for a decent mortgage rather than trying to avoid paying all the contributions and what have you that come with payouts through the payroll system. The joy for the likes of Hyperfy is that we take care of all of that along with the user's choice. So if the user wants to receive everything through the payroll system, fine, we can do that. If they want to receive a minimum through that and then a balance as a private entrepreneur or what have you, we can also accommodate for that side of things as well. So it's really, I think, the flexibility we brought, particularly to that newer arena of influencers and marketing agencies and what have you, that I think has been really beneficial for Hyperfy. And to be frank, has helped us shape the service that we have today, both for other sort of similar, more digital and knowledge sector type gig work, as well as obviously what we're doing in the kind of more offline sort of driving mobility services type gig work as well.
All right. So where is gig pay available at the moment and to who? And is that going to change in the future?
Yeah, sure. So we're really focused on it at the moment in 12 countries. We started in Croatia, and a little bit like the route we took when we were building our local employer record type business, we tended to expand to adjacent countries. So we're mainly across 12 countries in Southern Europe at the moment, from Portugal to Romania and kind of many of the countries in between. So Portugal, Spain and Hungary and Bulgaria and what have you, a few others. But that is expanding all the time. We kind of keep adding adjacent countries as we expand the footprint for that. Having said this, we do accommodate users outside of those countries. It just happens to be the case that we're more optimized in those countries. We're more automated in those countries. And that kind of tends to be the difference. It's kind of when we start to focus on a particular target country, we think, right, what can we automate here when it comes to registrations, deregistrations, the tax submissions, that side of things. So it's just, I'd say, a slightly more polished service in those countries that we've really focused on. But our overall footprint as a business is, I think we're 84 countries, something like that now. albeit for the local employment side of things. But the goal will be to really progress gig pay across all of those 84 countries in due course.
Okay, cool. And I guess something that comes to mind for me is potentially less developed countries could really benefit from this kind of service. Is that something that you guys are looking at in particular? I'm sure it's more difficult to set up.
Yeah, no, see. So as a rule of thumb, we've tended to kind of think that the more, to be frank, that the poorer, the more authoritarian, the more bureaucratic the country, the more problems we can solve. Because in many cases, I mean, in the more extreme cases, those countries really don't recognize freelancers or self-employed people at all. You're either employed or you're unemployed. There's not kind of a middle ground. So we can really bridge that middle ground. And I think as well, one of the areas to consider is that those often slightly less developed countries are areas where if we can find a way to put more money in people's pockets by making gig work more practical and feasible for them, then that's a real win for those people as well. Yeah, they perhaps have more to gain than somebody who's already working a good job in a more developed and rich country.
Yeah, and I guess also working towards overcoming a massive challenge in countries like that, which is, how so many people are kind of financially excluded from traditional financial systems for whatever reason, if it's, lack of access or, so that's, I guess, a massive potential benefit.
No, it is. We give every one of our users essentially the equivalent of a bank account, an e-money account, and a card. And to be frank, if I think about our product roadmap as we get towards the end of this year, we're looking to figure out how can we add more layers of financial innovation and financial services on top of what we already do. We already give people earlier access to their money, which is essentially kind of a loan of sorts. And the more we can do on that side of things, the better for them, and as you say, often in somewhat underserved sectors as well.
Yeah. So then I guess on that note, what do you think the future holds for GigPay specifically, and how do you see the platform being adopted over time?
I mean, we've been lucky. So we only launched GigPay formally a couple of weeks ago, although we've had it in practice for several months now, as we've been just kind of refining it a little bit prior to launch. Since we sort of probably launched it, we've had a real influx of interest and starting to see a bunch more larger scale users signing up to use the service. So I think that the growth opportunity we have for GigPay is really quite substantial, because this isn't a sector that people have tended to look at kind of fixing problems in. So it's relatively uncompetitive, or there's a general lack of competition. I think the biggest competitor we tend to deal with is the kind of the DIY type approaches that people have tried to figure out for themselves. And normally those DIY processes are hugely labor intensive and kind of prone to problems. So actually, we have a really strong pitch and value proposition when we start to speak to that kind of user. I think in terms of just where we see the future, so really a couple of kind of key points. First off, keep making sure we can get GigPay in the pockets, I guess, almost literally, of as many people as we possibly can do, to keep expanding the focus area of geographic footprint that we have, and to continue to look at how do we continue to optimize for different sectors. So we have a kind of like a standard platform that can be used pretty much by any sector. Already is being used from influencers to taxi drivers and what have you. But how can we look at some of these kind of slightly larger sectors, whether that's the care sector, construction, and a few other kind of larger areas like that, and just optimize things a little bit to kind of better accommodate for that particular type of user. It's only kind of marginal customization on top, but if we can make it, a version of GigPay which is perfect for a construction worker compared to perfect for a food delivery rider, then that kind of just brings a bit more utility and function and finesse to an ever broader group of users.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that's something that you can see kind of being developed over time as you?
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of continue to evolve that, and it's a real focus for our product team, for our customer success team, in terms of making sure they're speaking to our users, understanding, well, look, what is this system that was essentially built for the original users that we were speaking with? What does it need to do a little bit better to accommodate for some of the other people that have just started to kind of to pick up and use GigPay, even if they weren't necessarily our initial focus clients? And I think there's kind of one other area which I briefly touched upon earlier, but again, big part of the roadmap is how can we add more layers of financial innovation and functionality for the end users, for the workers, for the drivers and the riders and everybody else, because we are in a unique position to really have an understanding of how they're earning, the consistency of their earnings, and then to be frank, we are the kind of top of funnel when they are receiving those earnings. So we're better placed than anybody to perhaps be able to extend some more exciting and interesting and useful financial services to them than perhaps a more traditional bank or something would be. So that's an area that we're really looking to start to delve into a bit more towards the end of this year.
Well, it's exciting. And I think something that also stands out to me there is that there's more potential possibly than in traditional financial institutions for you to kind of receive direct feedback from people once they start using the platform, especially if they're coming from using it where it is now at a sort of general standpoint and hearing, what they need. As you say, if they are like construction workers, there might be something in particular that will help them, or influencers, maybe something completely different. So I guess that gives it a lot more potential to become more specialized later on.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we've always kind of really, so first off, as a business, we've always tended to have people in country where our users are. Many of the roles we've had to hire for, whether that's customer success or payroll teams or even additions to our in-house legal team, if they can be placed as well in country rather than necessarily having to be one sort of single location for the business. So we've always tried to be as distributed as we possibly can be as a company. So when we're doing these conversations with our users, it's not just over a kind of a virtual connection. In many cases, it's over coffee, and that's really helpful because you can actually get a bit more nuance as to what they're really looking for in that particular circumstance. I think one of the other things I would add as well is that because we can be quite intentional in terms of how we're rolling this out. So which countries, which sectors are we really focused on? And the profile of the people that we add to our team, and as we continue to build the GigPay team particularly, of course, the location is important and matters, but actually also having people that kind of speak the same metaphorical language as our users as well. So if I look at the profile of our account manager for taxi drivers and delivery drivers in Croatia, his profile is a bit different, for example, than perhaps somebody who might be, working with our knowledge sector workers in Spain, for instance. And you need that because you need somebody who can really empathize with the customers that we're kind of dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So that kind of human touch, again, is also pretty important in terms of how we think about supporting our users, listening to our users, and then kind of building a better product for our users into the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's different. Everyone's going to have different needs, and those are going to change. So I think that, that's pretty important. That's probably a pretty significant benefit that you'll have going forward. You sort of kind of touched on this a little bit, but what effect do you think GigPay and the service that it provides is going to have on the gig economy more broadly going forward?
To be frank, I think first off, in some sectors that it helps legitimize those sectors as kind of, real credible gig economy areas where people can earn a good living and earn it in a proper sort of formalized way. I'll take the influencers as an example there. I think we really allow people to think about being an influencer as their long-term career choice, because we can help make it easier for them to make their pension contributions and all the kind of boring things like that. But it kind of certainly brings a sense of kind of formality to employment, which, to be honest with you, is what a lot of people want. I think perversely, it helps bring more people into the tax systems. Our goal with Native Teams has always been to really help make sure people are paying their taxes, but paying the taxes they should pay, not overpaying their taxes, but equally not avoiding paying tax. And one of the things I think that has been a factor within the gig economy in many cases to date has been people actually sort of falling through the cracks in terms of either not knowing how to pay their taxes or not wanting to pay their taxes. And we really look to have a structure which allows people to pay what they should be paying, but to do it easily, not really have to kind of think about it too much. And I think the more we can help do that, the more we can help governments and other organizations think of gig economy workers as good work that's kind of make as much of a contribution to the exchequer as kind of a regular full-time 40 hours in an office kind of a job. The better. So I think we can definitely kind of really help formalize and professionalize some areas of compliance and taxation, perhaps in a way that hasn't really been tackled effectively in the past.
Yeah, for sure. So I suppose it's manyfold. It's helping people, practically speaking, receive their funds, financially, and then also socially, as you say, legitimizing sort of less formal or more modern career paths that are still not treated, as real careers or, in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal is for the parents of many of our users to hope that they grow up to be influencers and not always think they need to be a doctor or a lawyer or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so is there anything more or anything specific that's exciting that's in store for Native Teams or GigPay at the moment that we can look forward to?
Yeah, I think so. We have a really strong roadmap on the GigPay side of things, which we're excited to execute upon, as I say, more countries, more sort of focused sectors. more tools for the end users, for the workers themselves. So that's the kind of a big part of our roadmap. But actually, we're also looking to figure out how can we bring greater transparency to the kind of the EOR space, to the local employment space as well. Because to be frank, that's a constituent part of gig pay. You know, the ability to extend local employment contracts is really important. But it's a sector that has really evolved a lot and is continuing to evolve. So we have a brand new version of our local employment proposition platform that launches at the end of this month, actually, just to kind of really think about what is the future of EOR as a sector, employer of record as a sector, and how do we kind of best cater for that? And that really sees us democratizing it, break it down to its constituent parts of payments and payroll, entity management, advisory and compliance. To be frank, we're laying a big amount of AI on top of our found extensive knowledge base you have there to really help people self-serve some of the answers that they need, some of the answers they need around compliance. And to be frank, we're also looking to figure out how can we utilize everything we know about employing people in all the different countries where we provide that service, about all the work payments that we've delivered over the last how many years in all of these countries, and how can we help that kind of optimize people's financial futures as well. So on the one hand, there's a lot of tax-free allowances that people don't necessarily make themselves available to. So how can we kind of help them get access to some of those tax-free allowances they could be able to claim, they just don't necessarily know that they can claim. But also, how can we help them optimize their earnings for perhaps some of their longer-term life goals? So if we've got a user that, for example, wants to get a mortgage, knows they want to get a mortgage in 5 years' time, how can we help them optimize their earnings to kind of best reach that particular goal, even when it comes to kind of retirement and stuff like that? How can we layer on AI on top of all of the transactional and earnings data we have about all of our users to kind of help them achieve some of these kind of ambitions? Because to be frank, ever since we started Native Teams, it's tended to be people's life events that have really driven them to become customers. It's kind of them needing to get a car loan or wanting to make sure they qualify for health insurance, or just thinking, hey, look, I love doing what I'm doing, but I want to do this for the long term, and therefore I need to be getting paid properly and contributing to my pension and all the rest of it. And really, we want to make sure we keep going further down those particular roads as well. So these are some of the things that I think are most exciting for the quite unique position we have within the market, when it comes to the gig economy side of things, when it comes to the local employee side of things, and first and foremost for the fact that we have all of this earnings visibility that many of our competitors don't really have access to that. And it allows us to do a lot more and to perhaps bring AI-powered smarts to bear in ways that competitors perhaps aren't best placed to do.
Yeah, so I guess, as you say, there's a lot of potential there for people to actually really start being able to plan their futures in some of these less formal sectors as we see them now, which is really exciting, especially for young people who are taking up a lot of these new careers. Something that comes to mind, though, I guess, since regulation and compliance is something that you guys deal with already, what about having to deal with AI regulation, which is obviously quite a complicated topic and is constantly changing, and different countries and regions tend to be so far following technological innovation. How is that going to be a challenge for you going forward?
I mean, so it's going to be a challenge for us to the extent that it's a challenge for everybody. However, we have a whole dedicated department. We have a chief AI officer that we appointed 9 months or so ago. And really our job is to make sure we're across this, to make sure that we have, to be frank, some of those answers that our users are going to be looking for, that we help a lot of our users both navigate how AI is potentially going to disrupt the way that they're earning at the moment, but also how can we put it to the best use to make sure they benefit from all of the good things that AI can do, whether that's interrogating their earnings and showing them they can save, they can get €100 tax allowance here and a €50 tax allowance there, or whatever. So it's kind of how can we actually use it to their advantage as well. But it is a challenge. It's very different in different countries. To be frank, it's different in different sectors as well. So if I look at something like the Hyperfy use case, where we have influencers and marketing agencies, AI is going to play a very different role there than it does for mobility, let's say. Now, I know we've got robo-taxis coming through and all the rest of it. But to be frank, if we look at many of the markets where we are, it's going to be years before robo-taxis really make much of a difference. But if we look at influencers, AI was already impacting which influencers get hired for which jobs and all the rest of it. So we need to make sure we are helping our users navigate this as best as we can do. To be frank, to share some of those insights that we're starting to see in some sectors with sectors that have perhaps not yet been affected in the same way, but inevitably will be.
Yeah. For sure. I think AI is such an interesting one because it's obviously so exciting, but it's also very daunting in many ways. And it's something everybody's just going to have to keep an eye on. And as you say, having an AI specialist in your company is pretty much, the best way forward for now, and just kind of keep tabs on things and kind of just stay on the same page as far as possible.
Yeah, no, he's a guy that runs the whole team. So he's the chief AI officer, but we have a whole team of 5 people that sit beneath him as well, because we really need to be across this for our users for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that sort of popped up was, you're mentioning how GigPay and native teams has the potential to really benefit governments in many sense in terms of helping people effectively pay their tax. A lot of people that are either not paying or slipping through the cracks, intentionally or unintentionally, just because it's complicated. Do you see potential for partnerships with governments going forward?
Yeah, we do. It's to be frank, it's absolutely on our roadmap. They're the most important partnerships that we're trying to put in place. Yeah, we can't run before we can walk. We need to make sure that, if you kind of think about the kind of key stakeholders that we work with, so there's the smaller platforms, there's the aggregators, and what we call these 3PLs that kind of supply a bunch of workers into some of the mobility platforms. There's the bigger platforms, and then there's the governments. And each one of those kind of works at a slightly different pace. So at the moment, we're really focused on onboarding as many of these kind of smaller platforms and aggregators as we can do, because they move quick. There's fewer people in the decision-making process. We're starting to have much more engagement with the larger platforms, and our goal, of course, is to do more deals with them directly. But we're just starting to have conversations with some of the governments in a couple of the countries where we have been pioneering the GigPay product. We've actually started to. We had a government minister speaking at one of our events in Croatia a couple of months ago, and we are engaging at all sorts of levels with government. Obviously, government can be quite difficult to navigate, and there's the politicians that kind of set the weather and set the agenda, but then there's the kind of the people in the tax offices that you kind of really need to kind of come up with a pragmatic solution for. And we're starting to engage at all different levels there. But longer term, the ultimate rubber stamp for us, of course, would be for the tax authority in whichever country it might be to say, hey, look, if you work in the gig economy sector, you work through native teams, because that'll just kind of make your tax compliance far, far simpler than trying to juggle it yourselves. It's going to be a way before we get to that particular point, but that's kind of where we're striving towards.
Yeah, long-term goals.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, great. And then just from a practical perspective, where can people find the app now? Where can they download it?
Sure, it's on nativeteams.com, and we have apps on Android and iOS as well. So the apps are available on the App Store, but for a business, to create an account, nativeteams.com. And they'll find the right links to click on. Now it's pretty prominent at the top of the page.
Awesome. Sounds good. Jack, thank you very much for the conversation. Very much looking forward to see what happens with native teams, and GigPay will be following closely.
Cool. Thanks, Dean. It's been a real pleasure.